My name is Alla Marchenko, and I am the Executive Co-Director and President of the Aurora Philosophy Institute. It is my pleasure and privilege to introduce tonight's speaker, Ronen Grunberg, Vice President Technology of the API, who will speak on the topic of Marshall McLuhan, The Medium is the Massage, as opposed to message. Ron will explain. The discussant this evening is John Cummins, Community Affairs Director of the API. Over to you, Ronen.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ronen, could I just say something for a moment? Because
Sure.
we want to rename you tonight, and it will become clear as the presentation develops. Ronen is to be referred to as Ronen Maximus for this evening. Ronen Maximus. Okay, everybody got that?
All right. Okay. You got to let me. You didn't even let me have a word in yet, John. But yes, the reference. I do understand it. Okay. So welcome everybody, and let's begin the presentation. So I'm going to share my screen, and you got to tell me if you see the PowerPoint. Yes? Everybody's seeing it? It's all good? Okay.
It's perfect, Ronen.
Okay, perfect. Good. All right. So welcome, everybody. Today I'm going to be speaking about Marshall McLuhan, and the medium is the massage. Now, you might be wondering why it's the massage. And I have a book that I mistakenly left in the other room, which I'm going to quickly run and show you. That will explain why it's the medium is the massage. So give me 1 second. I'm back. So clearly the phrase is the medium is the message. However, in 1967, Marshall McLuhan with another gentleman by the name of Quentin Fiore wrote a small book called The Medium is the Massage. And this book is a very short précis of his ideas in understanding media, the extensions of man. The reason it's called the massage is because, now I'm not sure whether this is true or not, but apparently there was a mistake at the printers, and he got back the proofs saying the medium is the massage. And he thought it was brilliant because for him, media is like a massage. It massages our senses. So he thought, let's just keep it. Let's keep the title, The Medium is the Massage. And he also liked the fact that if you take massage and you break it up into 2 words, it's mass age. So he thought that was very appropriate given the fact that we are moving into an electronic mass age. So that's the story behind the title of my presentation. All right, so let's start by, first of all, just talking about Marshall McLuhan in very general terms. So everybody knows, I think almost everybody knows Marshall McLuhan. And everybody knows the cliches around Marshall McLuhan. However, very few people actually know the ideas of Marshall McLuhan, what he was actually talking about, the underlying sort of concepts that drove his ideas. So his aphorisms are famous, and we all know the aphorisms. They're things like the medium is the message, the global village, hot versus cool medium, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're well known. And in this presentation, I'm going to elaborate on what they mean and what he's really talking about. So in the late 1960s, Marshall McLuhan was a household name. Very popular. He could be found on numerous talk show situations and radio programs. Now, one thing about that is that apparently he did a lot of these shows, not because he really wanted to. He did them because he had 6 children, and he said he just wasn't making enough money as a professor to feed them all and live the lifestyle that he was accustomed to. So he went on these TV and radio shows. And this is good for us because he's left behind a canon of material that is very easy to find. You just go on the web, on the internet, you do a search, and you can find a slew of things on Marshall McLuhan. It's not very difficult, videos and writings and all sorts of stuff. Okay, now, as I understand it, it's generally a good idea to start any presentation with some lighthearted humor and levity. And it's not hard to do that with Marshall McLuhan. First of all, he loved humor. He was a bit of a, he liked to prod people, and he liked to see them squirm a little bit. And, he thought it was good to use humor to do that to people. So I'm going to show you one of my favorite Marshall McLuhan humor spots from the Woody Allen film Annie Hall. So this, I hope, will get you in the McLuhan-esque mood. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and then I'll show you the clip, and we'll continue.
Now, Marshall McLuhan deals with it in terms of it being a high intensity. You understand? A hot medium.
What I would give for a large sock with horse manure in it. What do you do when you get stuck on a movie line with a guy like this behind you?
Wait a minute. Why can't I give my opinion? It's a free country.
He can give you. You have to give it so loud. I mean, aren't you ashamed to pontificate like that? And the funny part of it is, Marshall McLuhan, you don't know anything about Marshall McLuhan's work.
Really? I happen to teach a class at Columbia called TV, Media, and Culture. So I think that my insights into Mr. McLuhan will have a great deal of validity.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Well, that's funny because I happen to have Mr. McLuhan right here. So yeah, just let me come over here a second.
Oh, I heard what you're saying. You know nothing of my work. You mean my whole fallacy is wrong. How you ever got to teach a course in anything is totally amazing.
Boy, if life were only like this.
Okay, so I love this clip as well. One of the interesting things, I've watched the clip, a number of times, and obviously I watched it when I went to see this film originally when it came out, and I was very young then. Anyway, I did watch the film the clip a couple of times, and I don't really understand what McLuhan means by you don't understand my fallacies. I don't really understand that. I heard it. And if somebody can tell me what he means by that phrase, I would love to know. Now, one explanation for it might be that, as I understand it, Woody Allen would just have his actors improvise. And I can see how he might have had McLuhan there. And he said, you're going to basically talk against this guy who's talking about, teaching your stuff, and, just improvise something, but, you don't like him, you think he's not a very good teacher. So I can just see Woody Allen telling him to improvise. He improvised, and Woody Allen was a first take sort of guy, we'll just do it once and then we'll go with it. And I presume, I imagine that this might be the case here. Okay, so let's just put on the slides again, and we'll continue. We'll have a number of clips as we go along. All right. So one thing I forgot to mention. There was a book written later on by Douglas Copeland where he used the line in the film You Know Nothing of My Work is the title of his book. I have the book actually on hold at the library, and I'm looking forward to reading it because it's apparently quite a good book. Okay, McLuhan, just a little bit of a background on him. So McLuhan started off as an engineering student, and he changed majors and ended up with a Bachelor of Arts degree. He continued his education and earned a Master's of Arts degree in 1934 in English. After that, he pursued a degree at Cambridge in 1936, and he completed his master's there in 1939 to 1940. So he basically had 2 masters, as I understand it. And then he began working on his doctorate. And he was awarded his Doctor of Philosophy degree in December of 1943. In the early 1950s, McLuhan began the Communication and Culture Seminar at the University of Toronto, and that was funded by the Ford Foundation. And at that time, he also published his first major work, The Mechanical Bride, in 1951, in which he examines the effect of advertising on society and culture. Between 1967 and 1968, he was named the Albert Schweitzer Chair in Humanities at the Fordham University in the Bronx. He stayed there for about a year, and then he returned to Toronto, where he taught at the University of Toronto for the rest of his life and lived in Wychwood Park, which is basically an upper class neighborhood near Bathurst and Davenport. And one thing about living in this area, apparently he loved the park there, which was kind of in the middle of the city, and he would love to go there during spring, especially, as I understand it, and watch all the flowers blossom and so on. And, you know, to the extent where he apparently even canceled a couple of tours that he had because he didn't want to miss springtime in this park. Anyway, in September of 1979, Marshall McLuhan suffered a stroke, which affected his ability to speak. And the University of Toronto, at this point, actually wanted to close his graduate studies program. And the reason they wanted to do this is because even though he was really, really big in the late 60s and up to the mid 70s, I was surprised to hear that by the late 70s, his status waned significantly to the point where he only had apparently 6 students join one of his courses towards the late 70s. So 6 students actually signed up for the course. In any event, they did not shut down the program because there were a number of people who protested, quite a number of people who protested, including Woody Allen, apparently, although his involvement, I couldn't confirm 100% that he was involved. I read in a number of places that he was involved, but I didn't check this completely, but I decided I would put it in there. And it would be an interesting thing if he actually did get involved in protecting his School of Graduate Studies. Okay, his major publications: The Mechanical Bride, Folklore of Industrial Man, 1951, The Grunberg Galaxy, 1962, Understanding Media, The Extensions of Man, 1964, The Medium is the Massage, 1967, War and Peace in the Global Village, 1968, From Cliché to Archetype, 1970, and then The Global Village, Transformations in the World, Life, and Media in the 21st Century, 1989, and that was a posthumous publication. Now, the reason that I've got Understanding Media, The Extensions of Man highlighted, bolded, is because my talk here is really fundamentally going to be around that piece of work. Okay. Now, before we go on, I'd like to have just a quick discussion as a group. Given that much of what McLuhan talks about has to do with technology and the fact that most people have an opinion about technology. I thought that we'd start with a bit of a discussion first on these questions. So let me just read out the questions. What is technology? How has technology changed your life? Can you live without technology? Is technology good or bad? Is there a specific technology that you get excited about? Does technology make your life easier or harder? If you could go back to an age without technology, would you? Could you? And finally, does media technology control us or liberate us? Now, before I open up the floor to a discussion on these questions or anything else that you might want to say, I just got to tell you that John Cummings and myself have had a number of really vigorous, let's say, discussions on these issues. And we don't entirely see eye to eye on technology. So throughout this presentation, John and I are going to go at it with each other a little bit, and then we'll open up the floor to other people joining in the conversation. But I will tell you my position on these issues, but I'm going to start by inviting John Cummings to give us a bit of his take on technology. Clearly, you can't answer all these questions, but pick your favorite one or two. And Alla, I'm going to ask you a favor. This whole discussion is not going to go on for more than 15 minutes. So you got to keep track. And at 15 minutes, you got to stop us in our tracks, okay? No matter what anybody's saying, because we got to go on. So, John.
Thank you for your trust, Ronen.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak, Ronen Maximus. Yeah, I mean, Ronen, because Ronen has such a high level of cognitive thinking and reasoning power, he can surf technology, use it for the benefit of himself. However, I think for the rest of us, people like me, technology can have a really kind of an ill effect on us. It's like I talk about this technological ape, like when Eve decided to eat that apple. I mean, that was a brave thing to do. She said, I'm leaving the savannah. I'm no longer going to be an ape. I'm going to be a human being. I'm going to understand the world. I want knowledge. And that's fantastic. That's what makes us all humans. And that's the fantastic thing. But then you use your imagination. You use your awareness. You create tools. And these tools have a profound effect on us. Like McLuhan says, they become extensions of us. And I think, Ronen, you're 1/10 of 1% of the population. The way you have a great ability to reason, to think through things, to not allow things to consume you. To these mediums and these messages are coming at us so fast and so furious that most people, I see it in the people I employ. They're dumbfounded. Their mental health is just sinking, and I believe it's because of the mass amount. It's the volume of the messages, the volume of the mediums. I mean, they lose their phone for 5 seconds and they're in a panic. Well, yeah. I'm seeing this with 50-year-olds now. If they don't have their phone for 2 seconds, where's my phone? What's happened? It's crazy. It's completely crazy.
Okay.
So I do. Yeah, I'll stop there. I do think it's having, for most of us that haven't got the cognitive reasoning, it's having an ill effect on us, and it's hurting us.
Okay. So thanks, John. First of all, I don't disagree that technology can have a negative cognitive impact, and Marshall McLuhan would agree with you completely, but he has a solution to that, which I will get to later. However, I would also suggest that technology has the ability to bring things to us and allow us to do things that really benefit us in many, many ways. But like everything else, technology is a double-edged sword. If it's taken to extremes, it can be very dangerous. It can be very hurtful. It can be addictive. It can numb you. It can do things that we don't want the technology to do. And I am completely with you about how technology can be a very negative thing. I'll give you one story quickly, and then I'll open it up to the floor. When I was teaching high school, I remember one day I had a student, on the phone. She was texting, and this was a history course I was teaching. She was texting, and I was getting very annoyed because I was seeing her text, and I was thinking she should really be listening to me talk. And so I called her on it. I said, what are you doing? I'm doing a talk right now. You should be listening and taking notes. She looks up at me and she says, I am taking notes, sir. I'm taking notes on my phone. And she said, you want to see you want to hear what you just said in the last 3 minutes? She read off everything that I was saying in class perfectly. She was using her phone to take notes. And it was easier for her because she could organize them. She could categorize them. She had a whole system that she set up, and it worked for her. And it was much better than taking notes on a piece of paper. So yes, technology can be bad, but it can also be very good. All right, so I said enough. Let's open up the floor and let's have other people tackle some of these questions, perhaps. So put up your hand, and then we can, Michael.
Hi, it's Michael. Nice to be here. From my personal point of view, I think technology is really hard to say is good or bad. I think that question is not a correct question, because technology comes from our human beings. But I think here there's one word we need to be careful. We call it the alienation process. So that means we are part of technology, and also technology also part of us. So that process, alienation, we couldn't. That's human being, So we created tools, and tools impact us. Doesn't matter is in technology, doesn't matter is kind of like a knife, whatever. So they will train us too. Is already part of our life. So we couldn't, but technology already in the world. So we are already in the process of alienation. So that's too late already.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Yeah, I would definitely agree that it has the possibility to alienate. Graham.
Thanks. I would just like to add to this conversation some historical perspective, which is that these questions have been raised in the history of philosophy over and over and over again. One of the spots that you see them that I think is central to the canon and still really interesting to investigate is in Rousseau's Discourse on Inequality. At the beginning of the second part, he talks about technology as involving a kind of trade-off. And when he's talking about technology, he means like just the invention of beds and shelter and anything that takes us beyond our pre-tool using selves. And says with every convenience that we give ourselves, like sleeping on a bed as opposed to the ground, finding something to cover ourselves with, building a shelter so that we're not wet and cold at night, with every convenience that we give ourselves, it's not long before that convenience turns into a necessity, and we weaken ourselves. When I teach my students this, I use the cell phone example. I ask them, is there some technology that at first was a great convenience and fun to have, and that now you can't imagine your life without? And they all know that I'm leading them to say cell phone without much effort. And I don't know, that seems like an insight to me that that the kinds of beings we are and the kind of world that we live, we give ourselves these needs. We might do better not to create these needs, but then they become needs. And the point that I'm most eager to raise is that this is something that folks have been thinking about for at least hundreds of years, but I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if you go back to Aristotle, Plato, you could find something in the ancient Greeks concerned with this idea as well.
Yeah, and I would say, from my reading on it, the ancient Greeks saw technologies very similarly to McLuhan in that it's supposed to extend something in us. It's supposed to enable us to do something that we can't otherwise do, make our hand better, make us stronger, or something like that. So, and it becomes inevitable that once we use the technology enough, it will just become a need rather than a want. Shashir.
Thank you, Ronen. Beautifully done job so far. I'm very impressed. The sense of humor obviously catches all of us. Having said that, it's wonderful that we are discussing technology. And you, of course, alluded to the fact that tools are also technology. And ever since the beginning of human existence, we've constantly been evolving, utilizing our tools, our hands, our whatever extensions we have are part and parcel of technology. But if we accept both of these things as being part of the media, of how we interact with our people around us, I'd say a couple of things. Number one, once we know what tools and technology are to us, we have to make that line comes to mind. First, we make our habits, and then our habits make us. It's an interactive process. So when people say, I like or dislike technology, it's really become part and parcel of you, as you mentioned with the girl with the telephone. It was an extension of her. And if it wasn't for the extension of these computers, I couldn't remember half the things I know. So it has really become part and parcel of a human existence. But as you well mentioned, it's a double-edged sword. And it comes with unintended consequences, which we've seen, especially in the recent past, how technology has been abused to the point that we don't know what truth is anymore. So I can certainly see some of the pros and the cons of it, but I think so far this is a very good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Shashir. Aaron, you're next.
Hello, thank you. Can I be heard?
Yes, you can. Loud and clear. The tech is working.
This is very nice. So with regarding the first question, what is technology? It has been already touched upon, and it's nice to see that we're not solely focused on things like electronics. But I sort of want to jump to question 3 and 4, sort of the idea of living without technology. And philosophy is not something I extensively study, but it is something I'm interested in learning. And I sort of wonder if society today can sort of live without technology, and I do mean including tools and such, because a lot of people may identify bows and arrows as being excluded from the term, but how would we hunt for food and such? But I am also curious to see back in the day when we didn't have things like that even. I'm not entirely sure how the first humans necessarily hunted without tools, and that would be kind of interesting to read about. For number 4, is it good or bad? Again, medication. I find medication to be very helpful. But I think this sort of depends on the person. I think you can ask the same person to answer this question, and they can give a different answer depending on whether they're looking from inside an organization or they're looking in from out. And I guess I can't really elaborate on that, but I think it's a very interesting question. I'd like to hear some other input on it.
Yes, thank you, Aaron. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right that the question of is technology good or bad? It's a question that's a little unfair because it really depends, and that's something I'm going to talk about in more detail later in the presentation. So this is just a bit of a warm up. And you're absolutely right. This is actually something McLuhan does talk about. When we think about technology, we think about modern technology, electric technology. But of course, everything that we use, including a rock that we pick up from the ground, is, in McLuhan's terms, technological, because it's an extension of us. It's doing something for us. So Leslie, you're next.
Yeah, thanks, Ronen. When I took a look at your questions here, I think what permeates a lot of those questions is the issue in regards to freedom of choice. We seem to be having fewer and fewer opportunities to have choice when it comes to the use of technology. While in the early days we had choice, now it seems that basically we have to use the technology in some cases, very limited cases. Privacy. We have no choice around that. You want to use the technology? Well, you got to give up your privacy. There's no choice in the matter. You want to do banking? Well, I'm sorry, but the pen and quill days are over with, and now you have to do everything electronically, and you lose your sense of independence in making choice. So I really wonder how technology is affecting the mindset in regards to feeling that you're powerless in an environment where things are being basically imposed on you if you want to survive in this society. Anyway, that's the kind of general theme. I'm sure we can elaborate more, but you get the sense.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And I think that the underlying sort of potential malevolence of technology is an important ethical and moral concern, which we'll actually talk about a little more later. Howard Lesnoff.
Ronen, excuse me. I think Howard has to be the last one in this part of discussion, and then we go back to you. Thanks.
Okay.
Sure. I was going to say I've managed. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
I was going to say I've managed to do without a cell phone so far, but it's getting increasingly difficult to do things like, access a parking meter or buy stuff or rent a car. So I kind of sympathize with the last speaker's point about the question of choice and also the question of power relations. It seems like whoever controls the technology, there's a tendency for concentration, for power to be concentrated in the hands of those who control the technology. So if you look at, social media platforms and algorithms, in some ways we've become objectified by those controllers of technology. So we do have some ability to, express ourselves and put out messages, but the environment's in some ways created for us, and the types of messages that we receive or the type of informational environments that we exist in are determined by, the controllers of the technology. In terms of good or bad, I think it's really hard to answer that question sort of generically. I think we have to ask ourselves in what ways are specific technologies, more hurtful or more beneficial. So, landmines versus agriculture or penicillin. So it really comes down to sort of case by case basis. And there are a lot of difficult cases in which there are lots of benefits, but also lots of potential dangers to any given technology.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for the very insightful ideas. We'll, I'm sure, talk more about them as we go along. Okay, so I'm just going to present the key ideas in understanding media. This is basically the structure of it, or his sort of key ideas there. So the medium is the message. Basically, the argument there is that it's not the content of any medium that matters. What McLuhan is very interested in is the underlying form that determine the content. And he goes back to that again and again and again. He says, it's not the content. We can't look at the content. If we really want to control and understand media, we have to understand the underlying essence that makes it what it is. So that's the first key idea. The second key idea is that we're shifting from mechanical technology to electric technology. So mechanical technology would include things like wheels, roads, the printing press, and those things influence us in ways that are very different from electric technology, such as the light bulb, television, the internet. Mechanical technology is different from electric slash electronic technology.
Okay.
Now, mechanical technology, he says, this is a key idea, detribalized humans, in the sense that if you consider the printing press and the publication of books, it brought us inward. It made us introspective because, it's something that you do alone. So, unlike the oral tradition where we're in a more tribal state, with mechanical technology and especially the publication of books, it made us much more individualistic and much more introspective. So mechanical technology detribalized humans, but electronic technology, says McLuhan, is retribalizing humans. And this is something that we're going through. It's like a paradigm shift for McLuhan, and it causes stress in the way that we interact with one another. So one of the key ideas there is that we don't understand the underlying mechanisms that are causing these stresses. And it's very important, he says, to understand those underlying structures that are causing the stresses for us to actually control them. Okay, so that's the basic outline. Let me just go into a little more detail. So one of the central ideas for McLuhan is the notion that the medium is the message. But with this concept, he's not saying that the content is important. The content is not important. He says this again and again and again. The content of media is not what is really important. Instead, what we need to focus on is the underlying form of the medium, because the underlying form determines its content, its effects. The underlying forms determine the effects of medium. He says, the medium is the message. This is merely to say that the personal and social consequences of any medium, that is, of any extension of ourselves, results from the new scale that is introduced into our affairs by each extension of ourselves or by any new technology. So every new technology has social consequences. Any medium affects our senses in a particular way. And it's something that we need to understand because every new technology will do this to us. So in essence, what McLuhan is proposing is that medium, the technology, not the content that they carry, that should be the focus of study. Because it's the medium that creates an environment. Okay, the medium creates an environment that is all pervasive. And because it's all pervasive, it becomes transparent. An analogy that I've heard him use is the idea of the experience that fish have in water. They don't recognize the fact that they're in water because they're in water. It's so all pervasive that they have absolutely no awareness that they're in it. Now, what he will say later is that we need to have awareness. That's the point. We have to have an awareness that we're swimming in media. Because the form of media is so pervasive, it is the characteristics of the media rather than the content that should be our focus. We need to understand it. We need to see the water. The effect doesn't come from content. A lot of people focus on the content. They say, oh, this is bad content. It's morally questionable. It has an impact on our psyche, blah, blah, blah. He says, no, don't worry about the content. The content will take care of itself if you understand the underlying forms. Every media changes the perceptions of society. So TV, radio, internet, they all have different effects. They have profound effects. To understand media and its effects, one needs to understand the underlying structures. I said it again, I won't say it anymore, but it's a really fundamental part of McLuhan. Okay, now a key idea is that media are an extension of ourselves. He writes, it is the persistent theme of this book that all technologies are extensions of our physical and nervous systems to increase power and speed. Now, this means that anything that is an extension of ourselves is a type of media. McLuhan's approach makes media and technology more or less synonymous terms. So a media is anything that extends our capabilities as humans. It's a type of expression. The wheel extends our feet. The phone extends our voice. Television extends our eyes and ears. The computer extends our brain. Electronic media extend our central nervous system. Again, in his own words, any extension, whether of skin, hand, or foot, affects the psychic and social complex. Language, for McLuhan, is a medium and a technology. But unlike other types of technologies, language does not require any physical object outside ourselves. Essentially, language is an extension that enables externalizing our inner thoughts, ideas, and feelings. So language is an extension of consciousness, but it's a technology. So every media or technology, regardless of what it is, extends our capabilities. Every tool, technology, and communication system by which human beings interact with each other is significant to what we become. There is a symbiotic relationship. And while we create technology, technology kind of interacts with us and recreates us. It's not a one-way sort of path. Technology changes how we think and how we respond to one another and how we interact with the world around us. Now, one of the concerns that people often have with new technologies, especially mass media technologies, is that these technologies are going to impact us negatively. And McLuhan was very much aware of this concern that people have. However, for him, technology is just something that exists. It's a matter of fact. We're born into it, and there's not much that we can do about it. When he was on TV talk shows and the host tried to, and this would happen often, more than once, but he would often be asked things like, do you think television is a bad thing? He would refuse to moralize about it. He simply said, it is what it is. It's there. And we're not going to be able to get rid of it. It's going to be there. Moralizing doesn't help. He also said that technology is something that continually evolves, and it evolves in unpredictable ways. If you take a look at old science fiction films, you see flying cars and all these technologies that really never came to pass. Because, of course, we don't need flying cars. We have digital technology. We can go wherever we want, like have a Zoom meeting like this. We don't have to have a flying car that will take us somewhere fast. We can get there instantly by virtue of digital technology and the internet. So technology takes a path that is unpredictable. Even people who predict the future and technology, what technology might happen in the future, oftentimes get it wrong. Okay, so the big concern is new media. Technology has been around for a long time, spoken word, written word, but new media is something different because its scope is much more extensive. So the new electronic technologies have had an unprecedented impact on humanity because they elevate the process of technological extension to a new level of significance. He says, whereas all previous technology, save speech itself, had in effect extended some part of our bodies, electricity may be said to have outered the central nervous system itself, including the brain. And when we look at the internet, we can certainly see how that may have come true. So pre-electric extensions are explosions physically in an outward direction, but electronic technology is an inward implosion toward a shared consciousness. The internet is a kind, if he saw the internet, he would say, we're getting very close to that, a kind of shared consciousness. Our new electric technology that extends our senses and nerves in a global embrace has large implications for the future of language. So the implications have to do with the speed with which we can extend ourselves. One example from the mid-1800s is the telegraph. Before the invention of the telegraph, it was necessary to move information physically outward via mail from one place to another. But with the telegraph, all of a sudden, information that would take weeks to get from one place to another could now be sent in minutes. And this flow of information has accelerated multifold with the internet. So the internet and social media has made it possible for us to do things that were barely imaginable 50 years ago, like access online libraries and encyclopedias, visit virtual art galleries, access news archives, online learning, exchange knowledge and education, collaborate, work when we do our work, visit doctors online, have social connections in distant parts of the world, watch movies whenever we want to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, McLuhan even seems to suggest that governance is a remnant of the mechanical age, and that eventually governance may morph into more global political systems that are more in line with the electric age. Whether that's true or not, it's anybody's guess. So this is the idea, of course, that we're kind of moving in the direction of a global village because of technology. So for McLuhan, the electric age represents the extension of consciousness, and it is a global extension. And this is something that he has mixed feelings about. He's not, taking a panacea kind of approach on this. He has mixed feelings. He says, rapidly, we approach the final phase of the extension of man, the technology simulation of consciousness, when the creative process of knowing will be collectively and corporately extended to the whole of human society, much as we have already extended our senses and nerves by the various media. Whether the extension of consciousness so long sought by advertisers for specific products will be a good thing is a question that admits of a wide solution. So he's putting forward here the possibility that we will be manipulated by media and corporations and advertisers. And he's questioning whether this is going to be a good thing. He goes on to say, with the arrival of electric technology, man has extended or set outside himself a live model of the central nervous system itself, To the degree that this is so, it is a development that suggests a desperate suicidal auto-amputation, as if the central nervous system could no longer depend on the physical organs to be protective buffers against the slings and arrows of outrageous mechanisms. I think what he's proposing here is the possible loss of identity, self-identity, in this miasma of media technology. So this is his more dystopian sort of look at technology, but he also has a positive outlook on occasion. He says, might not our current translation of our entire lives into the spiritual form of information seem to make of the entire globe and of the human family a single consciousness? I think he posits this as a positive potential. Okay, so I'll have more to say on this, this sort of value position that he takes on technology. But before we go on, what I'd like to do is have a bit of another conversation with everybody. John Cummins and myself are going to start it. So what I'm going to play here, I'm going to role play. I'm going to role play Marshall McLuhan, and John is going to play Malcolm Muggeridge. And I'm going to show you a very short video on which this interplay is going to be based on. I'm going to play about 3-4 minutes of it. And then we'll have I think 10 or so minute conversation on it. So let me just stop the sharing and I'll show you the video. Just give me a second here. Okay, there we go.
Well, for heaven's sake, this present time we're moving into, this electric age, is the dawn of much the greatest of all human ages. There's nothing to even remotely resemble the scope of human awareness and human greatness.
There we are, a value judgment.
Yeah, I don't know. This is quantity. Most people make their judgments in terms of quantity. Now, I'm merely saying quantitatively. This is by far the greatest human age. What further valuations would you wish to have brought to bear?
Well, I thought when you said greatest, you meant finest. That is, that would be biggest, more admirable than Renaissance, Florence, or something.
You mean the biggest? Yes, we're 1,000 times greater than the Victorian age.
In size.
In size.
But not in quality.
I don't know.
You don't know.
We may not, there might be some way. I mean, let's say if there's a good Lord, it's possible he might measure these epics by how a handful of air appeals to him. In other words, he might take a handful of air out of one epic and say, marvelous air.
Yeah.
He might take it out of our air and say, automobile exhaust.
Contrary to what Marshall was so brilliantly suggesting in all his writing, I think there are absolute standards in this thing, culture, in art and literature, and that these standards you can measure one age against another, and that we happen to have lived, no great misfortune really, we happen to have lived in what amounts to a dark ages.
We're a highly integral civilization, and this is what distresses people who belong to the old specialist, disintegrated one. They can't find a little place for themselves.
But are you sure, are you absolutely sure that this is the birth struggle of a new civilization?
Oh, yeah.
Are you absolutely sure that it's not just the breakup?
No, the
not just the
is
breakup.
new.
See, that's what I think is perhaps the whole difference between North America and Europe, really, is that you over here do believe that. But you do over here.
You have a bigger stake in the old technology.
Well, no, but we're inclined to think that all these things that you imagine to be of such enormous importance, like, for instance, this thing we're doing now on television, because a lot of people goop at television for hours every day. You're inclined to think that's an enormously important thing. And I just think it's a sort of sign of the kind of vacuity that comes when a civilization breaks, like the circuses in Rome. If it had been a Marshall McLuhan, then, you see, Caius Marcius McLuhanibus. He would have written a great book about the circuses, and he'd have said, here's this new civilization.
There's no medium.
No, they had no new technology. But Caesar, by the way, educated the Gauls by war. As this is the approved Western method of educating barbarians, is warfare. And Alexander the Great did it that way. Napoleon, I was reading a book on the Russian Revolution the other day in which the author was explaining enthusiastically that the great forward thrust in Russian institutions came from the Napoleonic invasions and then from the Crimean War. What is happening in the Vietnam now is a great educational forward thrust from us on the war front, on the war path.
It's very pleasant to think of it that way.
I think it's horribly, it's like roast pig. You know what Charles Lamb's theory of roast pig? You like roast pig? Burn your house down. Burn your house down.
Okay, I think we got the general gist of the clip. In essence, Muggeridge is not pro-technology, communication technology. I did notice that somebody put a message here. I think we're talking here about information technology rather than technology. This is on the message board here. So I just want to quickly say that McLuhan thought that every technology is a kind of information technology. Every technology sent a message of some kind or another. It didn't matter what technology we're talking about. Even technologies that are not explicitly based on media are still technologies that send a message. Anyway, so let's have a little sort of debate here based on the Muggeridge-McLuhan discussion, if you can call it that. Now, John, I'm going to let you have the floor first, but I want you to take on Muggeridge's accent as well. That's necessary.
I can't do that, Ronen.
Okay, all right. I'm just.
I've got that stage acting in me. But Ronen Maximus, you are so duplicitous. You're sitting there.
Am I?
Yeah, absolutely. You, Ronen, love art, love the mechanical age, love reading, love reasoning. You love all that stuff. You love culture. Muggeridge is talking about culture, and culture matters. And he sees these mediums as destroying culture. And you know they're destroying culture. You know they're destroying a high civilization. And we're entering into a lower civilization, siloing, people no longer learning to reason. The book reading helped people reason. This thing here is destroying our cognitive abilities, even our memories. I got kids at work. Well, I used to remember 50 jobs at a time, 50 customers, be able to know what parts we need, what this. Now I got to hire 5 people to do it. And they still don't know. They don't remember what they had for breakfast. The culture is we're losing the culture, Ronen. You know we're losing it. But you're pretending to be this huge fan of technology and how it's making us better and all this kind of stuff. It isn't. It maybe for you it is because you're able to navigate it. You don't even watch TV, correct? I don't think Marshall McLuhan watched TV either. He loved being on TV and being the court jester, but he didn't respect the medium. He knew it was profoundly affecting us and changing us. Your lecture says that the mediums do change us. Yes, I'm with Aldous Huxley in Brave New World, that these things are all this mass amount of media, mass amount of messaging. McLuhan doesn't give enough credit to messaging. Messaging is affecting us as much as the mediums.
Okay, well, I need to respond to this. I need to respond to this because, first of all, my name isn't Ronen, it's Marshall. But secondly, I think that you're missing the point here, John. It is true that technology, any technology, can be extremely bad for you. And I would agree that people do get numbed by technology. So when you point out that people overuse the cell phone or they overuse television, I agree with all of that. But my point is that we need to understand that technology in order to make good use of it. That's why I wrote my book, Understanding Media. If we understand the power that technology has over us, we will be able to deal with it. The problem is we don't have a proper understanding of it. People still use technology and worry about the content. They don't have enough of an understanding of how it actually works. And that's the problem. So you're absolutely wrong, John, when you think I think of technology as a panacea. I do not. Technology is a double-edged sword. The reason I wrote the book, as Marshall McLuhan, I wrote the book Understanding Media, The Extensions of Man, is because I wanted to point out that we don't have to be victims of technology. We can be masters of technology, and that if we take that position, we can use it to our benefit. Okay, let's open up the floor.
But 1 sec, Ronen, let me say one thing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
You expect way too much from people to be able to navigate through these mediums. I relate this to like existentialism. You're expecting people to create their lives, to do this, do that, without the use of, you need belief systems. You need positive mediums to do that. For most people, not you, but most people aren't Sartre. They just aren't. To think that we all are, you're dreaming. So we need good structures.
Yeah, what we
structures
need
that
is
create positive, that will create human flourishing, as Aristotle would say. And I'm telling you, this barrage of mediums and messages that we got right now is not creating human flourishing. For you, maybe, but 0.1% of the people it is, in my opinion.
What we need, John, is more education on how to properly use media. And that, I think, would make a big difference to a lot of the concerns that you have about it. But let's open up the floor and see what other people have to say. Sherman.
Oh, Ronen, if you look at Marshall McLuhan's book, Understanding Media, he talks about the myth of Narcissus.
Yes.
And where the boy is enchanted with his image,
yeah,
which is an extension of himself. And eventually he falls into the pool and drowns.
Yeah.
And so doesn't McLuhan make the point that our infatuation with technology will eventually lead to death? Because that's essentially the point he's making in the myth of Narcissus.
Yeah, no, it can. I think that McLuhan does see the potential hazards of technology, where we become so entranced with it that we lose sight of ourselves in a way, and it kind of takes over us. But he does have, I believe, an antidote to that. Certainly, technology is very addictive, and I think he would agree that technology is very addictive. It's like falling in love with yourself, and not really recognizing that there's another world out there, other possibilities. But I'm not sure that he's saying that we need to get rid of technology because of that. I think he's saying that we need to be careful and understand technology, and that would help us combat these issues that you're bringing up.
Doesn't he make the analogy that we are much like on a ship, a whirlpool, and we're floating on this technological whirlpool, and by understanding that the medium is the massage or the message, we will have greater control over our lives. Would that be true then? Is that what he's saying?
I think he's saying that we need to understand how it works, and that if we have an understanding of how it works, we can mitigate its influence on us. He also, and I'm going to talk about this later, is arguing that to focus on one technology, in the 1960s, television was the big thing. If you consume a lot of television, that is dangerous. It's addictive. It can numb you, but you need to do something else as well, because it's not just one medium that we have multiple mediums out there. If we have a balance, how we consume media. We consume television a little bit, but we also read books. We also watch movies. We also do other things. We're going to be more balanced ultimately.
Okay, thank you, Ronen.
Anyway, Tori, thank you, Sherman. That's good.
Thanks, Ronen. This has been great, very stimulating. So I think I'm wondering if Marshall McLuhan's one of his, paradoxes, or maybe it's one of his fallacies in the Woody Allen movie, was that his notion that the communication technologies wraps the world now together and creates lots of tribes and so on and so forth, that there was going to be some kind of coherent consciousness as a result of that. But what we're finding, obviously, now is there's all kinds of conflict and discourse.
Yeah.
But I would say also, to sort of John, I think it was John's point, your interlocutor there, that being too intellectual and analytical or something is somewhat of a vice, but it's the fact that participating in rationality was something only philosophers do or something, but actually it's not. Rationality itself is done in discourse. So to the extent that we're interacting globally in all these discursive conversations and conflicts and arguments, and we are actually, as a society, as a collective, we are being rational. Rationality is kind of a bruising sport, a combative sport, and that finding that rationality, it's not a coherent consciousness that maybe Marshall McLuhan thought we were going to have by this global brain. And by the way, as you know, other thinkers have recognized the coming of a global consciousness as a result of technology. And just one last point is, the technology is not some exosomatic device, physical device. It's also part of the practice of the human to live a certain lifestyle. So I'm of the belief that you can't separate physical technology from how you're actually using it. And so as technology evolves, expands, differentiates how we can live, there's a tremendous, there's a whole new practice of living that has an economic dimension to it. There's a tremendous amount of leverage in how we create a livelihood and put food on the table and that kind of thing as the technology evolves. And just the final point is that, yes, it's right. It's not, communication is sort of the ultimate goal of all technology. So all technology, even farmers' plows and things, are sort of a result of or augmentation of better ways of doing things and communicating than previous ways of doing things. So,
yeah, thank you. I would just very quickly comment to this paradox that we're not moving toward a global consciousness. We're in fact seeing a lot of conflicts in the world. And it's true. I think that one of the ironies of being in a kind of global environment is that we're finding that people are forming technological cliques, also known as echo chambers, where they kind of hear themselves. So to reference Sherman's Narcissus, it's a kind of cliques based on a kind of narcissistic approach to reality. And this is a bad thing. I think potentially has a bad sort of outcome. But I think that you're also right. I mean, technology allows us to extend the dialectic interactions that we have with one another. It allows us to see things that we otherwise would not see, meet people that we would otherwise not meet. And with the coming of virtual reality and augmented realities, we're eventually going to be able to travel, to places and actually be in places virtually without even leaving our homes. And what will that bring about? Who knows?
Yeah.
Rick, go ahead.
Hi, Ronen.
Hey, Rick.
First of all, a great talk, first of all.
Thank you.
I think Marshall McLuhan would have loved the digital age because, first of all, you can adapt your devices to do just about anything you want to do. You can block things, you can censor things, you can eliminate people you don't want to talk to, you can put your settings on your phone, you can do so much to make life easier for you that you're not stuck like with a book, and you pass a book back and forth. You can't really change what's on the written word. It's what's there is there. But with digital, everything can be so changeable, so personalized. It makes it much more effective and much easier to use in the end, if you're smart enough about it and take the time to actually learn it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you, Rick. I agree with that. And again, I don't think that technology is a panacea, but it can do so much for us that I think ultimately will be more good than bad. But we have to be careful for it not to turn bad. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to say, let's hold the rest of the questions because I've got a few more things to say, and we're coming close to almost the end. It's like 8:30. So would everybody be okay with that? Or do you want me to just ask the question, let people ask their question, and whatever time we have, we have. What do you think, Ala?
I would suggest go on with your presentation. Maybe I'm
Okay.
sorry for the
No.
question people, but I think we can give them floor after, if you don't mind.
Yeah, okay, so we'll do that. So Ala is the person whose word I ultimately take. So we're going to go on with the presentation, and then we'll come back to more questions.
Allah Akbar.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll take it.
Okay. So let me share the screen again. And there we go. Okay. Let me just move on here. Okay. We had the discussion. I'm just going to go very quickly through this hot versus cool thing that he came up with. This is an idea that is often quoted when discussing McLuhan, the idea of hot versus cool media. Frankly, this is an idea that I'm still trying to get my head around. It's a little bit confusing. In essence, though, I'll give you the essence of it. In essence, what he is arguing is that cool media are low resolution and therefore require a high degree of audience participation. Okay, so certain media require you to interact with it more. You can't just accept it passively. Whereas hot media are high resolution, they give you lots of data and therefore require a low degree of participation. So cool media require a lot of participation, hot media require less participation. Here's a brief video with him explaining this. So I'm just going to stop the PowerPoint and go on to the video. It's very quick. It's like a minute or so. Let me just.
I'd like now just to ask you about the distinction that you draw between different kinds of media within the electric technology. You call some, such as television, cool, and some, such as radio, hot. Now, what does this mean?
It has to do with the slang phrase, the hot and the cool, which puzzles many people. The way it's used in slang reverses the meaning of cool. Cool in the slang form has come to mean involved. deeply participative, deeply engaged. Everything that we had formerly meant by heated argument is now called cool in slang. Cool, though the idea that cool it has reversed its meaning, I think has some bearing on the fact that our culture has shifted a good deal of its stress into a demand that we be more committed, more involved in the situations in which we ordinarily work and experience.
A cool medium is one in which the definition is low and the audience has to work and supply the gaps.
Well, like the cartoon music that you were mentioning before, this is real cool.
Yes.
Whereas jazz, as compared with classical music, has many of these aspects of discontinuity and very much room for fill-in.
Yes.
But where the information or data level is low, the fill-in or participation is high. If you fill the situation with complex data, the opportunity for completion fill-in is less and participation is less.
Okay, so that's the definition. Let me just start the presentation again. Okay, so this is an idea that I find a little bit confusing, especially if you try to apply it to specific media. Here's a little bit of a chart on hot versus cool mediums. So a hot medium extends a single sense in high definition. It's slow in audience participation. It engenders specialization and fragmentation. It detribalizes and it excludes. So examples of hot medium include things like photographs, radio, phonetic alphabet, print, a lecture, film, books. A cool medium is low definition. There's less data. It's high in audience participation. It engenders holistic patterns. It tribalizes and it includes. And examples of cool medium are things like cartoons, the telephone, ideographic and pictographic writing, speech, orality, seminars, discussions, television, and comics. Now, I know that we can have probably a 2-hour debate on whether this is a reasonable kind of categorization. And I don't want to do that. I'm just going to say that this hot versus cool, the concept I understand. I think that some of the categories may not work quite well. For example, television is cool. Oh, television is cool according to Marshall McLuhan. And this is an important point I should mention before we move on. Something can be cool today, but it can heat up. It can heat up. Television, I think he would say, is actually more of a hot medium today than it was in his day. So in his day, television tended to be black and white. It tended to be very low resolution. It tended to be watched on a very small screen. It tended to be watched by a group of people together. So it tended towards being cool. There is not a lot of data that came at you from early televisions. But today, television is definitely, I think, heated up because there's so much data coming at you from televisions, stereo, sound, 4K video, sometimes even 8K video we're moving towards. So there's a lot of data. So it's a lot hotter now than it used to be. Okay, so let's move on from this. You can talk about it more during the discussion part of the that we'll have in a minute. Now, I was going to talk about Marshall McLuhan's son, Eric McLuhan, who published a book called Laws of Media. where he conceived of the Tetrad. And I'm not going to go through this because I don't have the time. I will put this on the website. If you're interested, you can go look it up. It's an interesting way of thinking about the evolution of media. So it's kind of what he calls the laws of the Tetrad. And he believes it highlights a certain law in terms of how the media evolves over time. But I'm not going to go over it because we don't have the time. But I do want to finish this off by talking about McLuhan as a moralizer or not a moralizer. Overall, McLuhan was not a moralizer. In fact, he refused to take moral positions about technology. Even though he was a devout Catholic and he apparently read the Bible every day, his private morality did not let him influence his scholarship. A common answer that he would give to any question about the value of one type of media over another is that to moralize about media is detrimental to knowledge. Do not moralize about media. Intellectually, he said it's questionable because a moral point of view too often serves as a substitute for understanding in technical matters. I'm not going to read this. It's a lot, but I am going to read this, which is really interesting. And it's a quotation from a interview he gave to Playboy. So he said, for many years, until I wrote my first book, The Mechanical Bride, I adopted an extremely moralistic approach to all environmental technology. And by environmental technology, he meant technology that changes our environment, the environment that we live in. He didn't mean natural environment. He didn't mean environmental change the way we talk about it now. He just meant the environment in which we live in. I loathed machinery. I abominated cities. I equated the Industrial Revolution with original sin and mass media with the fall. In short, I rejected almost every element of modern life in favor of a Rousseauian utopianism. But gradually, I perceived how sterile and useless this attitude was, and I began to realize that the greatest artists of the 20th century, Yeats, Pound, Joyce, Eliot, had discovered a totally different approach based on the identity of the processes of cognition and creation. I realized that artistic creation is the playback of ordinary experience, from trash to treasure. I ceased being a moralist and became a student. The world we are living in is not one I would have created on my own drawing board, but it's the one in which I must live and in which the students I teach must live. If nothing else, I owe it to them to avoid the luxury of moral indignation or the troglodytic security of the ivory tower, and to get down into the junkyard of environmental change and steam shovel my way through a comprehension of its contents and its lines of force in order to understand how and why it is metamorphosing man. Cataclysmic environmental changes are in and of themselves morally neutral. It is how we perceive them and react to them that will determine their ultimate psychic and social consequences. So, despite his refusal to moralize and pass value judgments on media, McLuhan was well aware that the power of certain media can be addictive. For example, TVs, smartphones, YouTube, Netflix, they have a narcotic effect. They potentially can have a narcotic type effect. In fact, one of the reasons I think that he wrote Understanding Media is to warn us about the effects of media that we are ignoring. We're ignoring the effects of media. So while he doesn't pass judgment on media, because each media affects us differently, they all have value, but they all have dangers. What he seems to believe is that there's an antidote to media's addictive nature. And the antidote is really simple. It's awareness, being aware. By being aware of the effect media have on us, we can be in a better position to counteract them. In his own words, he says, "It is the theme of this book that not even the most lucid understanding of the peculiar force of a medium can head off the ordinary closure of the senses that causes us to conform to the pattern of experience presented. To resist TV, therefore, one must acquire the antidote of related media like print." He says here, it is true that it's not enough to understand something. It's still going to affect us. I can understand the influence the TV has on me, but I can still get addicted to it. The real answer is to not just watch TV, to counteract TV by reading a book, by knowing that you need to turn off the TV and do something else. So basically, an antidote to the numbing effect of any particular medium is to use another medium that has a counter effect. This is in his own words. When the technology of a time is powerfully thrusting in one direction, wisdom may well call for a countervailing thrust. So basically, turn off the TV or the computer or the smartphone or whatever, and do something else, like read a book, go out for breakfast with friends and have vigorous chats, make something, perhaps your own media. For example, make a YouTube video, because making media, for example, a YouTube video, is different from consuming media. It's still media, but it interacts with your senses in a very different way than consuming media. Again, McLuhan is arguing that a cure for the effects of any dominant medium or pattern of the time can be a countervailing force in the opposite direction of the dominating force. Another way, he says, to deal with the numbing effect of media, and this is something he referenced in the quotation that I read, the Playboy quotation, is to assume the attitude of the artist. Assume the attitudes of the artists. He says the effects of technology do not occur at the level of opinion or concepts, but alter sense ratios or patterns of perception steadily and without any resistance. The serious artist is the only person able to counter technology with impunity just because he is an expert aware of the changes in sense perception. So to take an artistic approach is to basically analyze media by virtue of using concepts. Don't just consume them. Interact with media. Don't be a passive consumer of media. Have an artistic kind of relationship to media. So an artist is anyone who engages in insightful analysis and tries to understand the underlying life of forms and structures created by electric technology. So an artist is a person who has integral awareness. Again, he writes, the artist is the man in any field, scientific or humanistic, who grasps the implications of his actions and of new knowledge in his time. He is the man of integral awareness. So finally, one more quote, and then we can continue with a discussion for the remaining time. It is not an exaggeration to say that the future of modern society and the stability of its inner life depend in large part on the maintenance of an equilibrium between the strength of the techniques of communication and the capacity of the individual's own reaction. Okay, now I'm going to stop here, but I do want to say that one of McLuhan's followers is a theorist, communication theorist, and a historian by the name of Neil Postman, and he's written some amazing books that I highly recommend about technology and media and how they influence us. He's more dystopian than McLuhan. I was going to talk a little bit about him. There's no time, but I recommend that you, if you have a chance, get the book Amusing Ourselves to Death, which I have right here. And it's an amazing, this is Technopoly. Technopoly and Amusing Ourselves to Death. They're both great books, and I highly recommend them, okay? So I don't have Amusing Ourselves to Death here. I do have the book. I couldn't find it. It's been a while since I read it, but they're both amazing books and highly recommended. Okay, so let's open up the floor now for discussion. And I'm going to let John be the first to just make a quick point, and then I'll open up the floor to everybody else. Let me just stop sharing here, and we can continue. All right. Tori, you're pretty big there for some reason, which is interesting. But okay. Sherman, do you want to, or John, where are you?
I'm right here.
Oh, okay. There we go. Oh, we've got it on. Yeah. Okay. Speaker.
Ronen Maximus, I'm glad that those last few slides that you came clean.
Yes.
About how you feel about technology. And I've come to have the very same view as you through our discussions, that it's a lot to expect of us to be able to have the ability to discern the messages and the mediums, the way they're being bombarded at us. But like you say, they're just simply turn them off.
Yeah.
And, I kind of think like, the mass amount of mediums and messages are, in my opinion, having a profound effect on people. McLuhan would agree. But having a profound effect, like on what the Buddhists call our sixth sense, which is our mind. I think our sixth sense is our mind. And that mind is in conflict and can create a lot of psychosis when it's trying to deal with all this barrage of mediums and messages. And, we're being denatured, like Jack London would say. I think it's really happening to a lot of people, not to you, Ronen, right? I mean, you grew up with the Talmud and the Torah. The Talmud is a real reasoning, rational, kind of existential way to live life. And it teaches people how to think, and therefore not to be overwhelmed by technologies and mediums and messages, because you've got a grounded base in rationality. Not all people do. And I guess this is where I move into that more dystopian Neil Postman thing, that we have to be maybe more aware, but McLuhan is admitting it here. We've got to figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm saying is I think it's much more of a struggle for other people.
Mm-hmm.
I see it.
Thank you, John. I think we're
got to be careful. Yeah.
We're ultimately seeing, I think, eye to eye in for the most part. Okay, Sherman, go ahead. Go ahead, Sherman. You got to unmute. You got to unmute.
So I would like to talk about briefly about McLuhan's Catholicism. And so in the early 1950s, he read Etienne Gilson's books. deeply. He was very aware of Gilson's perspective on St. Thomas Aquinas and metaphysics and so on. But by the late 50s, he was reading Lonergan. And one whole point of Lonergan's book is the idea of insight. And sometimes I thought that upon reading McLuhan's books, it does seem to represent a compilation of insights gathered on our material culture. And then upon evaluating our material culture, we have these insights into the communication system. And thereafter, we would have some conceptualization, maybe some metaphysical system, a way of understanding our communication media. So there isn't a great deal written about McLuhan and Lonergan, but if you look at McLuhan's introduction to Harold Innis's book, Empire and Communications, it's just like reading Lonergan, where he talks about Innis's ideas of a series of insights into communication systems. That's all. I just want to bring that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He was heavily influenced by Harold Innis and Lonergan, and really respected their writing. You know, and again, I don't have a lot of knowledge on this because I haven't done all the reading really on that, but it's definitely a wonderful place to go to and to find the influence that they had on him. And of course, Harold Innis had his own sort of theory of communication technology and you know, a more anthropological sort of approach to it, as I understand it. It's all very interesting, but it's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
It is a lot.
Very good presentation, Ronen.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherman. Aaron, you're next. Aaron?
Yeah. I guess I wanted to kind of go over some of the ideas. I guess I need some input on it if anybody's even able, if we have the time. But sort of just the idea of kind of the medium is destroying a culture, and then the idea of sort of regressing instead of kind of pushing and progressing technology. And I think it's important to sort of recognize that technology is sort of instilled within not just humans. I don't think we invented technology. For example, many invertebrates, such as octopi, would sort of find things at the bottom of the sea and use them as sort of closure, or use them as tools themselves, or even have kind of turf wars. And so I guess that's sort of the ocean and the fish, in my eyes. And then I don't really see the point, then again, in moralizing it, if we're going to compare that with the whole TV aspect. And that in that final quote, there was the whole maintenance and equilibrium portion. And then I sort of think then that if we're not looking to regress, or we're not looking to or halt the technological progression, then this is sort of the mitigation. These are sort of the things that we are taking, whether it be in part of your own responsibility to kind of counteract the negative effects of technology, or perhaps solve those negative issues with new technology. I think it's important to sort of continue to progress.
Yeah, no, and you know, somebody pointed out at the beginning of the presentation when we had our little discussion that with technology now, we are abnegating our identity. We're abnegating our privacy. We're giving up a lot of things, and it's true. So with any technology, with any powerful technology, we're going to get into a situation where it can potentially harm us. I think McLuhan is ultimately saying that we need to understand it and we need to control it. If we don't, it will control us. And how do we control it? We control it by teaching it properly in school, by not worrying about the content, because the content is incidental. Worry about the underlying structure and learn what it's all about, and then you will be able to deal with it, both the positive and negative sides of technology. Anyway, Stella, your turn. Finally.
Hi. I just wanted to say how, obviously, coming from it from a point of view of someone who's never lived without a lot of the technology that I'm sure you guys have had lives without. And it's been interesting for me personally as a teenager having a baby boomer dad to see the way that he interacts with technology versus my mother, who's of Gen X, versus me. Like, we span, well, as many generations as 3 people can span. And I do think it's interesting how each one of us interact with technology differently. And obviously, that's to be expected from 3 individual unique people, but also I do think it does have to do with our generation too, quite a bit. But I also just wanted to say that I do think it still comes down to the individual big time, and how we interact with technology and what we think we can and cannot be done. And my phone would let me in. Speaking of technology, I wanted to read a quote from one of my favorite writers, but this is not going to happen. Please let me in. Thank you. Okay. When I think about technology and my relationship to it, I think about an Emma Goldman quote that I really like. And she said, changes wrought by machine intervention are completely on the external side and leave the real battle, which has to be fought from within the person. And I really like that quote, because I think in such a short statement, it does really sort of sum up a lot of both what we've been talking about, and also the vast majority of people do let things that are external affect them internally, and that's sort of part of the human condition and being alive. But also, I think the more we incorporate technology in our lives, the more likely we are to have it become something that feels internal rather than external. And I think we often forget that. And then sometimes it can be easier and harder depending on your age. For instance, I've noticed that a lot of people my age are in some ways more attached to their technology than older generations, because older generations haven't had it their whole lives. But in other ways, older generations are more captivated by it, whereas younger generations tend to be a little bit more like, this has been around all my life. I've noticed that people 40, 50, 60, 70 are way more into technology in the sense that it's still like this really interesting thing to them, which can actually be a curse to them because it is so interesting and new to them still. They feel like they have to be using it all the time almost to catch up, like it's a competition. And I even feel like that sometimes because I'm by far not a very tech savvy person compared to a lot of people I know. And a lot of older people are like, well, you just have the advantage of being young. So, like just by definition, a lot more. And I don't think that goes away with time, because like anything that can be learned, like technology is something that requires a lot of learning, and a lot of learning that we're both willing to do and not willing to do. Like, I'm not willing to spend a huge part of my life learning how to do things on my computer that will not serve me. However, I am willing to take some time to learn how to pirate books well, because I really enjoy reading books and I don't want to pay for every book that I want to read. So it depends. It's also this like pick and choose of like what in the same way with physical things and learning physical things, like how badly do you want to be able to sew things? Or are you willing to put in the time to do that? But at the same time, it's also not fair because we're not given all equal access to technology and to learn it either, or the same amount of time to learn it. So it does continue disparities that are already prevalent in society as well.
Yeah, no, it's true. And, there's a lot to learn with technology. And you say you choose what you're going to use because it serves you well. You don't just blindly follow it. You really are very careful about it. And that's because you're a thoughtful person. And, you admitted to pirating books, and it brings up a whole different issue around technology, which is, of course, the issue of copyright and what does it mean to actually have a digital copy of something? Is it real? It, I think, brings up ontological questions of being and reality and metaphysical questions. And these are questions we didn't even touch on today, but they're fascinating questions, perhaps for future discussions. Anyway, Michael, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I think we can learn as much we want, but I feel it's kind of like a self satisfaction games. Whatever you learn, whatever you do, pretty the same. You you look at the past. We don't think like we are much smarter than the past in the generation. But that's it. But what I want to say is like if technology develop in that way, so based on the technology, because you say extension by the mouth, by the thinking, by the vision. So does mean if technology can collect all the behavior of human beings, technology can simulate another person, so they know what the individual person they want to do. That means if we involve like power in the society, so that kind of like in the mechanical we call elementary finite. We can simulation the car. Technology can do this. I think technology can simulate the behavior of human beings. For the individual point of view, that impact. From society point of view, what I say is currently the society is vertical like a pyramid, right? The top, middle class, and the bottom line. So if technology involve the power in, could it become in the future is kind of like parallelism? That means the top, the middle, and the bottom line, they completely separate. That's kind of like a society impact. So I just want to mention, I just want to raise like two questions. One is for the individual person impact. Another is for if technology is involved power, probably the society become from pyramid to the parallel the models. So that's
okay. You brought up another interesting question there, Michael, around how technology might simulate individuals, human beings. If I understand you, I think you're talking a little bit about artificial intelligence and the potential that artificial intelligence has to affect how we interact with technology. If you think of technology like Google Home, which it's in its infancy.
Because currently the application they do that. The YouTube, they propose the things you want to see.
That's right.
The bookshop and whatever they try to do that.
That's right. And so as technologies become more intelligent, that's something we have to be aware of. But of course, it also has a lot of positive, but again, negative as well, because we don't want to be inundated with advertising and stuff, because our technology has an algorithm that understands us, and that's basically stealing our identity. So we have to be careful about it. It's true, but it's just part of the evolution of technology, and that's what McLuhan is saying as well. That technologies tend to flip. So computer technology, where we have to input information, will eventually flip into something where we don't have to input any information. It will, have the ability to self-replicate and to create its own algorithms and interact with us in ways that is very natural. And that's again a double-edged sword. It's dangerous, but I can imagine if you're all alone, lonely at home, and you have nobody, but you can get a technology that can actually converse with you intelligently. Maybe that's a good thing. It keeps you company, and it's a double-edged sword. Randy,
sorry, for the society, could it be into the parallel from pyramid to the parallel?
I'm not sure I follow that argument, Michael. I'm not sure I understand it. If somebody else understands that argument that Michael is putting forward, maybe you can respond to it. Michael, can you write it down in the chat, and then I can respond to it, because I'm not sure I follow the argument. So if you can write it down, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Randy.
Great presentation, Ronen. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And this comment will come as no surprise to you, but I would argue that the greatest impact on technology is our standard of living. Communication and energy is a fundamental part of growth in the economy. So McLuhan has addressed how we respond to the technology on a personal level. But the actual impact of the technology is the growth of our economy, and that creates the circumstance that we're actually reacting to. And that just doesn't seem to be addressed. Of course, I don't think he was an economist, so I suspect that's probably why it wasn't. So I would just say that is the overwhelming impact of technology in general. As I said, I'm sure that doesn't surprise you, that comment coming from me.
So I'm just wanting to flesh it out a little bit. Are you saying that economic prosperity influences how we use technology, or it influences our ability to acquire technology?
Well, it actually creates the culture where we are responding to. And the technology that we're using to respond to that is sort of a byproduct of the growth that technology has achieved for us. At least that's the argument I'm making. And we seem to be dealing with the individual and how we're reacting. The medium is the message on how we're going to react to that. But how we're going to react to that is really largely governed by the economic circumstance that we're reacting within. It is a bit of a circuitous argument, to say the least. But the big issue with technology is what it has done to our economic growth.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think that there's a difference between the micro effects, which is to the individual, and the macro effects, which is more economic effects that lead to prosperity. I mean, technology has a ubiquitous effect on economic growth. There's no doubt about that. It also has an impact on the kind of jobs that people do. The way technology evolves leads to people sometimes losing jobs, acquiring different types of jobs. It increases productivity. It does all sorts of things that lead to economic prosperity. I would say possibly more than not prosperity. So you're absolutely right. I don't know that, McLuhan was not interested so much in that as far as I know. At least I haven't come across a lot of stuff that he wrote that have to do with like the macro effects of technology.
No, it'd be very difficult to define. There's no question about that. But the tensions we're seeing in society today may well have to do with a much greater disparity between the wealthy and the less wealthy.
Sure.
Which is a byproduct of our technological change.
Sure.
And that's the economic circumstance that now we're responding to through this media, this mass media.
Sure.
It is a circular argument, to be sure.
No, you're absolutely right. That's why the government is constantly pushing for high bandwidth across the country for everybody, because having internet, having access to technology is part and parcel of prosperity. People who don't have access to technology tend not to have access to prosperity.
Well, look at the Zoom we're on right now. I mean, we're using this as a personal means of communication, but by far, the major impact was been on business. What happened during COVID? Business was all on Zoom, or people at home. So that's the type of technology that actually changes the fundamental structure of our society.
For sure.
Thank you,
I
Ronen.
agree with that completely.
No, thanks a lot, Ronen. It was great. And John,
yeah,
thank you.
Thanks, Randy.
Okay, Ronen, can I make a little announcement that probably Torres already has raised his hand. So, Tori, you're going to be the last one for tonight. And I want to say thank you to everyone, and especially to you, Ronen, for doing that.
Thank you for listening, everybody.
Oh, it was a pleasure. So, but just let me remind you, this is going to be posted on YouTube. And anyone who wants to say something and didn't have an opportunity, please go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, and we have a comment section, and you can put it like a maybe discussion and writing if you want to share your thoughts with us. So that's it. And okay, maybe Tori, you can go now.
Thank you. Just quickly, but it's actually kind of a big point that since this is a philosophy club and institute, I think the point that needs to be made is that technology is ontologically inseparable from practices, human practices. So there's no such thing as a technology that's separate from people using the technology. And the commercial system and the business system of industrialization is constantly building new technologies, relying on science to create new technologies, but that it leads to a division of labor in all kinds of fields that are doing different practices around their own proximate technologies of work. And so the modern era of industrialization is constituted by a whole bunch of tribes of different practices, professions and trades and classes of, bourgeois people, where we relate to our tools that our industrial system provides. So I think that, but it leads to this modern way of life. And I think, Emil, back to Graham Hubb's point that Rousseau pointed out, there's these sort of transitions from, luxury items to necessities. Adam Smith picked up on that. He has three categories: luxury, necessity, conveniences, and necessities. And as the human race develops all these new technologies, the standard of living goes up, but we're also producing those technologies as occupations. So it's not a circular argument, as somebody else had said. It's this cumulative, path-dependent way of our practices leading to the incrementally next technological breakthrough. And there's kind of there are no absolute standards in that development, for one thing. But as you've been saying, and Marshall McLuhan, we not only create technology, but technology creates us. It's that inseparability between the thing of any particular technological thing and the practice of using that thing. Those are not separable ontologically. So it's a way of life that we are entering in the modern age. Emil Durkheim, I think, has made some great points that once we get out of religion and a lot of these sort of normalizing belief systems in society, and we get into these discrete occupational groups that are all doing sort of their own tribal norms, we face a whole new situation in history where we're so technologically separated that there's that lack of coherence that the old religions used to give us. So that's part of the problem. We have tremendous leverage. We have a high standard of living, but we're quite anomic or without norms to go by. So the best thing we can do is plagiarize books that, like Stella was talking about. Here's a great book, I think, of some economists right there in York University, Capital is Power, Jonathan Nitzan and Shimson Beichler, that you can download for free. Be very good reading, I think, for this group. And those are my...
No, but no, they're great points. I totally agree. I mean, it's ontologically just a part of who we are, and it's something that makes us in some way as well as we make it, and it is something that becomes, I wouldn't say a necessity, but just a reality. It's there. So, Graham was talking about how, we have something that is created and it's okay. It's a thing that, is a part of our lives, but we don't need it. But eventually it becomes something that we do need. And I think that technology works like that. It evolves and it penetrates us in ways that we find it very, very difficult to live without it. And the reason we find it very difficult is because I think it ultimately makes life better. But as McLuhan says, any technology also has the potential to make life worse. And that's where human consciousness and awareness need to play a huge part. And by the way, I did listen to a talk by Eric McLuhan, and he did say that we're not there. He says, technology is not being taught well at school. It was a thing I heard on YouTube. He was talking to somebody about technology and the medium and how it's taught. And he says, we still focus too much on the content and we don't really teach media studies in ways that are actually insightful enough to make a change into how we interact with technology. Anyway, thank you everybody. It was really a pleasure to do this, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Ronen, John, and everybody, Alla, and everybody. It was an excellent.
John, thank you for being my nemesis. I appreciate it. No, I can't hear you, John.
John, unmute, please.
No, you got to unmute, John. You got to unmute. You got to unmute, John. Come on, learn how to use the technology, John.
John the Luddite.
It's a magnificent response from John. He refuses to use the technology. Well done.
Okay, everybody. Thank you. I guess we're going to call it a night for tonight.
Thank you. I wanted to make one quick comment to you, Ronen, about technology. I think it's really interesting because for me, I use technology in a large part to connect with the past for me, just because I'm such a big nerd for history that I really a lot of times think about the irony of the fact that for instance, I have a friend who's very good at uploading. So everything that, we watch can be in one place that we can save to then go back to instead of having to find a source or way to get the thing again after you've already done it. So I'll put mainly obscure films that are hard for me to find again on there. And sure. I always think how funny that is to me that I'm okay, I'm watching this film from, 1927 that I think is really cool. And I'm, nerding out over it, but I'm watching it on a flat screen TV and I'm streaming it from my computer. And it's, this digitally digitized version of this film reel from almost 100 years ago or something. Or the same thing, I went with my parents last night to, it's called Silent Movie Mondays, and a really pretty old theater here for a couple months does silent movies on Monday, and they're doing women this whole month for Women's History Month. And I went last night and it played 2 Lois Weber films from 1913 and 1916, I think, respectively. And it was really cool because they had it all pieced back together, especially because the film had eroded in parts. So they took other shots from some of our other films to to fill in a little bit. And also they just left parts of it unfinished. And I thought it was really cool. And even though they didn't have the actual reel playing, they brought out the old organ that was from that time period to have it be playing at the same time. And I was like, this is interesting. So we don't have the actual reel. So the part that I'm viewing is modern, even though it's from a film from over 100 years ago. Yet the music I'm listening to is pretty authentic to what I would have been listening to the same thing 100 years ago had I been sitting here with my parents. And
Stella, I want to ask you to report back to us in approximately 55 years' time.
Yeah.
You know, and like I can remember like what the world was like, you know, when I was 17. TV was black and white, for example, right? So please report back, as I say, in 55 years' time as to the change.
I'll be sure to do that. You'll be how old again?
Oh, I'll be like, you know, 100. I'll be like Methuselah. I do plan to live that long. You know. Okay, thanks, Ronen. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.